Storm has become something beyond comprehension, an absolute power, an unstoppable force. The X-Men have tried to stop her before and failed, and now they're back for the ultimate rematch. I'm Andrew the Geek Master, and in today's video, we'll see if Cyclops' team has any chance against this divine entity. To not miss stories like this one, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and let's get started. The chapter begins with Cyclops' X-Men standing in front of the once-beloved Utopia, the former home of the world's most famous mutants, now completely devastated. Beyond the humiliating defeat the mutants suffered in the last chapter, Psylocke has also lost contact with Beast, who had infiltrated Storm's ship. Temper is still helping Cyclops thaw out, but the team is truly worried about what's happening with Storm. Psylocke has no idea how she reached this terrifying level of power, but now they have a much more urgent concern. Charles Xavier's tumor appears to be causing a psychic contamination that is affecting the entire population of San Francisco, which could lead to madness and, ultimately, death. Speaking of Charles Xavier, he is the one who stops Beast from destroying Storm's ship. He uses his powers to keep the mutant telepathically paralyzed until he realizes that Beast's mind has a mental knot placed by Kid Omega, who, as cunning as ever, had set up a safeguard in the minds of all his teammates before facing the world's greatest telepath. Charles is pleased with his student's growth and asks if Cyclops sent him, to which Kid Omega replies that he came to put an end to the suffering Charles is causing in San Francisco. This means we're about to witness one of the most insane telepathic battles between Omega-level telepaths in Marvel Universe history. But now, let's see what happened to Storm after the conflict in the last chapter. It seemed that Juggernaut was completely defeated, but against all odds, Cain Marko proves that he truly cannot be stopped. He provokes the wrath of the universe's embodiment by insisting that he has suffered worse beatings than this. His own father once beat him so badly he almost lost his sight, so he calls her Girl, saying she still has a long way to go before she can match that. Meanwhile, back at the current X-Men base, some mutants lament not being able to help. Among them is the feared Magneto, who cannot interfere without risking destroying the world due to the degenerative disease caused by his resurrection. The other mutants with him are inexperienced and could also cause a disaster. However, at that moment, magic simply appears through a portal, steals Magneto's famous helmet, and then disappears as if nothing had happened. Magneto's helmet happens to be one of the best defenses against Charles's telepathy. And indeed, magic places the helmet on Hank McCoy's head, pulling him out of his trance. Upon waking, Hank finds himself witnessing the impressive mental battle between Quentin and Charles Xavier. You might be wondering how an Omega-level telepathic battle works. Well, as expected, it all happens inside their minds. For example, we find ourselves back at Xavier's Institute for Higher Learning, where Professor X asks his students to pay close attention. An Omega-level mutant is classified as having no upper limit to their powers. They possess limitless power. Therefore, any conflict between Omega-level mutants with the same power can only end in a stalemate. Professor X then asks the student sitting in the back of the classroom if he agrees with this, and we see that it's Kid Omega himself. Yes, the boy finds himself back in a time he wishes he could erase from his mind. The professor continues the lesson, explaining that when two Omega-level telepaths are evenly matched in power, the deciding factors are variables such as experience. And in that regard, it's obvious that Charles Xavier has a massive advantage over the boy who suddenly finds himself drowning in a sea of Professor X's. Xavier makes Quentin revert to being the lonely, depressed, invisible schoolboy he once was, someone who even seriously considered taking his own life. Charles forces him to relive this tragic phase of his life, even telling him that it would be better to surrender now because the professor doesn't want to be responsible if something worse happens. At the same time, Juggernaut continues enduring all of Eternal Storm's attacks. He even asks if that's all she's got. Completely irritated, the entity responds that her winds can strip flesh from bone. However, when she tries to unleash her winds at that level, to her surprise, nothing happens. The one responsible for stopping Eternal Storm's attack is none other than Temper, who explains that wind is just air in motion. What makes air move is temperature, so while Storm controls the weather, Temper controls what creates the weather. This only makes Eternity even more furious. She responds that she controls far more than just winds and summons several celestial swords, which excites Magic because she also loves swords and manifests her demonic blades. It's funny that before this new battle, Juggernaut laments that his helmet is broken. But then Magic reminds him that his armor is connected to his soul. He just needs to summon another one. And sure enough, Kane had forgotten about that detail. He summons his weapon and is now back in his powerful form, just in time to face Eternal Storm once again. As the fight begins, Magic manages to drive her blade into Storm's heart, but in this form she is invulnerable. Even Juggernaut uses all his strength to land a massive punch on Eternity's face, but she once again proves how superior she is by simply asking if the X-Men are done with their attacks. This is when Magic realizes just how dire their situation is. She has looked deep into the soul of the being before her and discovered that this isn't Storm. Storm is being controlled by something far greater and far worse. Knowing this, Psylocke says the only way out is to bring Storm back, and apparently she knows exactly how to do it, by finding the cocoon where Maggot is transforming into a new Omega. Back to Quentin Quire's torment at the hands of a terrifying Xavier, Professor X insists that his former student surrender because this is no longer a fight. It's abuse. The boy, already at his limit, agrees that Charles is right. Back then, he was lost. But even so, he knew he never wanted to be like Charles. Besides, he still has a card up his sleeve, something he calls his attorney that Charles needs to meet. It turns out that Kid Omega has been infiltrating the minds of potential adversaries and collecting their worst fears and greatest threats. When he needs to face them, he unleashes those nightmares, shattering his enemies' psyches. So if Quentin was forced to relive the worst phase of his life, Xavier will suffer the same fate by coming face to face with his beloved sister Cassandra Nova. Yes, Charles ends up tasting his own medicine and receives a dose of psychological torture that completely breaks him. And if this battle is reaching its conclusion, it's time to settle the standoff between the X-Men and Eternal Storm. Psylocke orders Eternity to stop, or she will end Larval's life. Eternity responds mockingly that she will obey, but Psylocke reveals that she's not talking to the entity. She's talking to Aurora Monroe. Storm needs to return to her body because thousands of people are suffering and many are on the brink of death because of what she has brought upon them. Storm must take responsibility, otherwise Maggot will die, and that will be her fault. And sure enough, we see Storm finally returning to normal. On the other side of the ship, Charles Xavier finds himself lost in his own torment, to the point of removing his own helmet. This allows Beast to place Magneto's helmet on Professor X and inject him with a powerful sedative to put him to sleep. With the battle decided, Hank even asks how Quentin managed to defeat Charles, and the boy is honest in his reply. He used a dirty trick. Meanwhile, Aurora orders Psylocke to step away from Maggot, asking if she would really have the courage to kill a defenseless man just to punish her. Psylocke responds that she would. After all, she has killed more innocents than many diseases. She also says that while Aurora is a goddess, the rest of the mutants are just monsters who will take the monster that Xavier has become with them. If she's not happy about it, she knows where to find them. Psylocke has heard that Aurora likes knives, and she has one specially prepared for her. Storm doesn't attack them or try to stop them, but she doesn't agree that the X-Men are just monsters. She sets only one condition for them to take Charles away without further battle. At the same time, the beloved leader of the X-Men has been unconscious this entire time, missing everything his team has done. As soon as he wakes up, he receives a telepathic message from Psylocke, informing him that the mission was successful. They managed to capture Professor X, and most importantly, with no casualties on the team. They will soon reunite with Scott Summers, but Storm made them promise that Charles will not return to Greymalkin prison. She wasn't aware of all the suffering Charles had endured or the psychic hemorrhaging that nearly killed the people of San Francisco. What's clear is that something is wrong with Storm, and the same goes for Charles Xavier himself. However, just when everyone thought things would be fine, a voice orders Hank to put the bald man down, and we see that it's none other than Warren Washington III, the world-famous Angel, and alongside him stands the new and sensational formation of the X-Factor. And so Storm has finally regained control, Charles Xavier has been defeated in an unimaginable way, and just when everything seemed resolved, the X-Factor appears, likely leading to yet another clash with the X-Men. Now leave a comment down below with your thoughts on this saga, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next adventure.